Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Real Risks of Retirement and How the Cost of Aging Calculator Can Help. My name's Alyssa Hodder, and I'm a senior researcher with the National Institute on Aging. I'm going to be your moderator for this event, so thank you once again for joining us. I'd like to open today with a land acknowledgement. The NIA is based in Toronto, which is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Now, before I introduce today's guests, I have a few quick housekeeping notes for you. Please note that all audience microphones will be muted throughout the webinar. If you have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical issues, please let us know in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. The format of today's webinar is a brief presentation and discussion with our two speakers, followed by audience Q&A as time allows. If we don't get to your question today, please feel free to email us at coa@torontomu.ca. At the end of the event, you'll also be invited to complete a brief survey. Please take a few minutes to share your thoughts. We value your feedback and use it to inform future events. The recording of the webinar will also be available after the event. And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's speakers. Dr. Bonnie-Jeanne MacDonald is Director of Financial Security Research at the NIA and also co-leads the NIA's Pension Center of Excellence. She's a fellow of both the Society of Actuaries and the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, as well as the resident scholar at Eckler Limited. Dr. MacDonald's work is dedicated to enhancing retirement financial security for Canadians through practical insights, industry innovations, and government solutions. Her research contributions have received numerous awards and have been adopted by industry and government, both in Canada and around the world. And our special guest today is Rob Carrick. With decades of experience covering all things related to money, he is Canada's trusted personal finance explainer-in-chief. Rob was the Globe and Mail's personal finance columnist for 27 years and then began a new career phase as a speaker, writer, and consultant specializing in personal finance strategy. So please join me in welcoming Dr. MacDonald and Rob. And now I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie-Jeanne to formally introduce you to the Cost of Aging Calculator.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. So as you said, I'm the Director of Financial Security at the NIA. We're one of Canada's most impactful research institutes. We started about a decade ago, and our unique mandate is really how do we look at how to help Canada's aging population, not just from the traditional financial lens that my background takes me to, but also to bring together all the aspects of aging, the health side, the wealth side together, because offering valuable solutions that are really going to help Canadians achieve better financial security. It's not just about how much money they're going to have. It really does need to take a holistic approach and incorporate all the factors that affect our well-being. That's what the NIA aims to do, and that's really what I'm passionate about. Take what we learn from the academic research world together with insight from government and industry in Canada and around the world, put it all together so that we can come up with better solutions that are really going to help Canada's aging population. So the problem statement of this presentation, and really all of the research that I do, is the reality that we have the biggest population in Canadian history going into retirement, and they are unknowingly facing a type of perfect storm when it comes to their long-term financial security. Not only is secure lifelong retirement income going down because less pension plans, less savings, but actually the price tag of retirement is actually going up. And that's because life expectancy has actually gone to a historical peak, but family sizes have decreased to a historical low. And what we know through the research is that without the support of adult children, retiring Canadians now will have to need to prepare to finance a longer time horizon with less money and higher expenses. So basically, workers today are really facing a type of perfect storm as they move into retirement. And as bad as that sounds, it's actually even worse than I would say a perfect storm. I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and when we know there's a hurricane coming, we can at least prepare for the cost because we know it's coming. We can prepare for this storm. We can buy flashlights. We can get a generator. But that's not the case for retirement. In fact, we know these factors are going to make it very, very difficult, more difficult than in the past. But we don't actually know how much a lot of these expenses associated with aging are actually going to cost, especially those related to declining health at advanced ages. So in Canada, the great news is that we have so many people who are helping Canadians to get ready for retirement. But here's the missing piece. piece. There's actually no price tag on this thing that everyone is saving for. The issue is that traditional retirement planning looks at what people's projected retirement income resources will be, but how much is actually enough for retirement is actually driven by your future expenses in retirement long after you've retired, and that could be decades. So although the cost of retirement right after you retire is largely the same as before, as the same as before you retire, the dirty secret here is that basic expenses are going to change dramatically as you age in your retirement. Now that can be by choice, or it could also be by circumstances, especially with declining health. And with baby boomers having that longer lifespan, less family support, those costs are going to land on them. So the fundamental question then becomes, how much will retirement actually cost, not only now, but decades into this future? These costs are complicated, and this information gap really does represent a significant barrier to effective retirement planning. And the disconnect is, without a clear understanding of the costs that retirees face when entering this completely new stage of life, how could they possibly, or their advisors, know if they're actually prepared or not over the long haul? So wouldn't it be great if we actually had a tool that gave the typical costs retirees can expect as they age, given their different circumstances and how they would change and evolve? Wouldn't it be great if we could do this, not just for affluent retirees, but for the rich, the poor, healthy, the unhealthy, whether you're living in my city, Halifax, or across the country in Vancouver? What if the NIA actually did develop such a tool that the entire sector could use to help elevate retirement financial literacy across the country? And that is exactly what we did. I'm extremely excited and proud that this is the problem we've been working on and recently released through the National Institute on Aging's Cost of Aging Calculator. So this tool really does provide that critical missing piece of information to help all Canadians and those who support them to better understand the costs that they can expect to face at later ages in retirement. The COA Calculator is a web-based, interactive, online, and bilingual tool that addresses this critical information gap, pricing the cost of aging across Canada for the entire income spectrum. The people who will have a modest retirement, people in the middle with a little bit of a more moderate retirement, and people a little bit higher on the income distribution who will have a more comfortable retirement. It provides customized estimates based on real-world data of those future expenses, including what is the cost of your food, typically, what's the cost of housing, whether you rent, you own your home, across Canada, the cost of transportation, whether you're renting a car or you're going to take a bus, and also other day-to-day essentials. But most of all, and here's the real missing piece, what are the costs of support and care as your health could decline? And not only are we doing this on average, we're also doing it according to the user's key characteristics that can dramatically change those costs. So your marital status will drive those costs. What type of home you live in, like I mentioned, if you rent or own your home, what's your health levels? Do you actually need home care needs? And also the geography, where do you live in Canada? Because it does cost a bit different to live in Toronto than it does to live, say, in Halifax. This information will give workers planning for retirement not only point estimates of the costs they can face given their circumstances today, but it's also going to help them understand how those costs would look if and when their circumstances change during retirement. So the COA Calculator really is a credible and authoritative tool for industry, government, and individual Canadians to reference when they seek to fund the dynamic cost of aging across Canada. Now, the work that went into this started actually over 15 years ago, and it's really the first of its kind in Canada. It is grounded in strong research foundation. It began with the Canadian Elder Standard. This is a research-based metric that I published in Canada's Journal on Aging with Dr. Rob Brown and Doug Andrews way back in 2010. I had built on that research and its methodology, and I conceived of this tool that could be actually used for social and public good, and that with a very bold and inclusive vision. And He Chen, who's also a senior researcher at the NIA, he really believed in this vision, and he helped to bring it to life. So Chen basically built on that research foundation. He expanded the tool to cover more than 700 different scenarios. The tool required over thousands and thousands of research hours and growing. There's actually 11 tailored modeling methods, surveys of nearly over 100 different organizations. We're drawing on data from all levels of government together with non-government organization. So that's all details, but for what you need to know, it really is a uniquely robust and evidence-based tool. Now, what makes this so much one of a kind is that it's not just projecting retirement income resources. We're actually showing typical expenses older adults can expect to face as they age, so they can financially plan for these changing circumstances. And that's really where the magic happens. So people naturally go on the website and they start to tinker with the tool. They play with the what ifs. What if your health status changes? What if you become a widow? What if you move cities? Now you've achieved something so difficult. The user now is contemplating what we call financial risk. Now, when it comes to retirement financial planning, future financial risk is really hard to understand and to explain. And as an industry, we've done it very badly because it's very hard to communicate. But the minute that you, as a user, someone planning for retirement, actually tinker with a tool, what you're doing is you're unconsciously learning the financial consequences of the risks that you're going to be facing in retirement. And you've won, because it's only when you appreciate that your retirement future will have these risks that you actually start to value financially planning for those risks and the value of strategies like joining a pension plan that will help protect you against them. And just to be clear, I actually spoke of, and we have a very wide network, and we spoke with top financial planners in Canada. They even themselves do not have reliable estimates for these costs, even like the cost of care, especially even for their most affluent clients. These numbers were genuinely built from the ground up. They're not otherwise publicly available. Chen made hundreds of phone calls, and he integrated again over 100 data sources. We score, and of course, when I came up with this idea, I thought there's no way no one else in the world has done that. I know no one in Canada has done this. So we looked around the world to find if there's other examples we could learn from, and we did find two. We found a similar one in the UK and another in Australia. And those were both massive million-dollar projects. So we designed this tool to overcome three things that really kill most financial literacy efforts. The first is the psychological barriers. The next is, just really fundamental financial education barriers. And the last one is distribution barriers. And that's largely due to commercial conflicts. This COA Calculator actually has removed all three, and we've done this intentionally. First, it removes the fear of the unknown. Mark Twain said something pretty funny that always stays with me. And he said, I've lived through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened. And the thinking there is that a lot of the things we're scared of is just happening in our head. But the minute we're actually able to look at real numbers, real things, the real unknowns, this really does take away the fear factor. It gives you dependable guidance, because the idea, if you can measure it, you can manage it. So by actually giving people real numbers to look at, the world suddenly looks very manageable, even those things that are a bit scary to think about 10, 20, 30 years into your retirement. Second, these are actually real numbers. There's no projections here. There's no black box. These are numbers people can reflect on, they can evaluate them themselves, and they can trust. It really does provide this very authentic, fundamental financial literacy. And it also gives people a guiding light. Yogi Berra also famously said, if you don't know where you're going to end up someplace else. So the idea, it does give you that basic guidance. And third, and most important, there is no commercial branding of any kind in this tool. It's under the halo of a leading research institute, the National Institute on Aging at Toronto Metropolitan University. We are not collecting your data. We deliberately chose not to pursue commercial funding, because if we put a company logo on this tool, it really would have limited adoption across the sector. Pension plan regulators, competing firms, nobody wants to hand their members a tool branded by somebody else. So funding this from foundations actually was a deliberate choice to ensure the cost of aging calculator is a fully neutral tool for the public good, one that all stakeholders could support and benefit from without concern for commercial conflict. And this approach will enable it to reach exponentially more Canadians. So how much is it for the public? It's free. So this tool is really to serve everyone here today and many more with no strings attached. Uh, so we'd like to thank today Peterson Foundation for their support. They provided this key funding that allowed it to be unbiased and non-commercial and all those wonderful things that protects the distribution of it. And we're also incredibly grateful that we have been awarded financial support from CERO, which is the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization of Canada. I'd also like to thank the many people who had given their time, expertise, and wisdom to help, including everyone at the NIA and our Pension Center of Excellence member. For any of those who are not familiar, I founded the Pension Center of Excellence at the NIA last year and co-lead it alongside another academic at Simon Fraser University. Her name is Barbara Saunders. This is the largest national collaboration of its kind. We bring together pension plans, employer regulators, and researchers from across the country, and we're all working together to strengthen retirement income security through high quality research and evidence-based solutions. Here are our members. Now, the reason why I'm showing this to you is because what makes the PC so unusual is that it's entirely non-commercial. And that independence is exactly what makes it work, because it means that everybody at the table, even competitors, can get behind research and the same tool. So here you're looking at a picture of the Government of Canada, the regulators, our major insurance companies, small pension plans. And again, we're all working together to basically improve retirement financial security for all Canadians. And the cost of aging calculator is such a perfect example. Although no one from here was funding it directly, this whole group has really championed it from the start. They've given us enormous feedback. They've shared their expertise, and they've helped us accelerate the adoption across the country. So they're extraordinary supporters. And the reason this tool is going to reach so many Canadians is because of so much support by so many champions and experts across Canada who really they have a commitment to give Canadians something better. So thank you. So that's the cost of aging calculator. At the NIA, we know that financial preparedness is key to aging well, but confidence in making informed decisions really starts with knowing what to expect. So whether a retiree is planning decades ahead or is already retired, the COA calculator really does help them anticipate the costs that will matter most. This public-facing tool, it's free, it's bilingual, it's built with evidence-based data, and it will become a trusted resource for Canadians at every stage of the aging journey. We've designed it, thanks to Chen, to be deceivingly simple in all of the right ways for the users, but the methodology and the data sources really do have unparalleled rigor. It is unique in serving the entire Canadian population, not just the affluent, but also the lower income and people in the middle, across the socioeconomic spectrum, as well as all the stakeholders who serve them. Again, it's really a robust, incredible foundation that all the stakeholders, all of us together, we can actually help build more genuine, bottom-up, rich and real retirement financial literacy. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm now going to turn it over to Alyssa and start our conversation with our incredible guest, Rob Carrick.
Sounds great. Thank you, Bonnie-Jeanne. That was a great introduction to the tool. So, Rob, we're going to start with you on the discussion. What are your impressions of the COA calculator? Bonnie-Jeanne talked about how it's one of a kind, but I'm wondering how, in your view, it compares to other retirement calculators and tools available and how it might advance the conversation on retirement planning.
Before I get into that, I just want to give you a little ground level intel on how the calculator is being received. I wrote a column about it. I continue to write every other week for the Globe Mail. And last Monday, I wrote a column about the calculator. And I was on the Globe website this morning, and I see that in the personal finance area, it is still trending 7 days later. That's unusual. Tells me people are really interested in this. They're recognizing it as a source of information that is not available elsewhere. And I can tell you that's true in two different ways. One, I'm a longtime personal finance writer, but I'm also the son of a 97-year-old mother and two 80-something in-laws. And I have had to stick my nose into this kind of this area extensively in the past year or two, and I know what's not out there. And when I saw this and it was pitched to me as a story idea, I thought, yes, light bulb turned on. This is something that is not available elsewhere. And it's key information that people are just waking up to gradually. It's different in every household too, and they're struggling to find the information. And it is available, but like it's like putting grains of sand together. I think this really builds you something that you can get quick, unbiased answers on, and I think it has huge value for that reason.
Excellent. Bonnie-Jeanne, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add too, because Rob put it so perfectly. I just, for the sake of our legal protection, I'll just mention the COA. It's really intended to be a tool for everybody. So I'll talk about kind of what it's supposed to do for people, also what it's not supposed to do. So just to be clear, it's not kind of financial advice. It's not going to tell you what you're going to invest in, when to claim your pension. But it does, again, as Rob said, it's trying to answer a question that no other tool in Canada has really answered. And that's what retirement is going to really cost, not the year after retirement, but again, decades from now when your circumstances change. And that's the missing piece. I think there's so many there's a lot of tools out there that are trying to show you kind of how much money you're going to have and how. But this is basically giving you the kind of the liability side of the spreadsheet, like what are you going to need to pay for as you get older, and what are those costs you're going to face. So again, I think it's for individuals who are sitting at their kitchen table and they're wondering, like, what happens if I were to move to, Toronto from Halifax? What would happen if we sold our home? What would happen if we did need care? And I think that's probably the most important question people retiring should be asking themselves. The other users we've seen for sure is within, the pension plan world and by employers. It's what's nice, again, it's a tool that people can give to their members about worrying about, any kind of commercial conflicts. It's purely descriptive data. It's not collecting data. It's giving descriptive data that we've collected across Canada. And there's no branding, again, there's no product tie-ins, and we're not giving actually financial advice. We're just giving information. And pension plans, employers really appreciate that because they also don't want to be giving financial advice, and neither does the government. We just want to be giving really tailored, quality information that are going to, help improve financial literacy. And the other thing is for, I guess, the financial service industry, I just want to really flag again that we're not competing against any of these financial tools. We're trying to complement it, and it's actually going to enhance the relevance of those tools because by showing actually the cost of retirement, it's going to show how important financial planning really is. And again, for me personally as a researcher, I really think of the policymaker implications, how there's so many ways we can use this tool to look at how well the Canadian retirement income system is serving people, not just, the first year of retirement, but 30 years later. For people at Halifax and Toronto, Montreal, whatever, in different, socioeconomic stages and at different health stages. But again, I just want to go back to what I started with. It is just a research resource. Everyone's situation is different. People should always, get professional advice. But what this tool will give you and give your advisor is just a clearer picture of what those costs could change and help to ground your conversations in some really, strong statistics. And I would just, one last thing is to say that, we really did everything we could to make sure the tools is accessible to all users. But we do ask, because it is research, that you do cite the NIA, and the research leads myself and Chen, just because that's the way we do things in research. It protects the integrity of it. So that's my answer. Thanks, Alyssa.
That's an important clarification to make, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I just wanted to point out in the chat, someone just said, as a financial planner, I just want to say thank you. Your contributions and research to provide information and insights that we can use to help Canadians. So excellent work. That's fantastic news. Maybe we'll move back to Rob again then. Bonnie-Jeanne talked about how the cost of aging calculator can help lots of different stakeholders. You probably have the best insight on this. How can you see this helping Canadians, especially in the financial planning sector?
I think this is in a way as a gift to financial planners because you are modeling someone's retirement lifetime, could be 30, 40 maybe years even. And I don't think there's concrete information to model out the later years. And I think the later years have been kind of ignored in financial planning. It's almost like there'll be It's like this vague period when your spending will trend down, and we'll just leave it at that. I remember one financial planner telling me long ago that he saw 3 stages of retirement. There was the go-go years when you're spending a lot, traveling and enjoying yourself. The slow-go years when you slow down and you're not traveling as much and doing as much. And then the no-go years when you are, for health reasons, sort of you're staying in place more. And the implication there was that spending would trend down, like the go, slow go, no years. It's like a downward plane of spending. But I think we're learning that that's not true. And the calculator shows how it's not true. And it gives planners data that they can model in plans. And I think it's going to produce better financial plans, because instead of either ignoring the cost of aging or trying to estimate what it will be, now you can use hard numbers. What community does my client live in? What is their living arrangement? Are they single? Are they married? What's their health profile like? Maybe they're healthy now, but in their family there are health issues that are likely to come up. We can model that. We can say you may need the full care of a nursing home. You may feel that nope, you are one of those people who wants to age in place. Well, let me document the costs of doing that. And I have this hard data to do it. And I can put that into your plan. And we can achieve a higher level of precision in mapping things out than we ever could before. So I think any planner who isn't consulting this, I question how zeroed in they are about the costs of extreme aging.
Yeah, that's fair. Bonnie-Jeanne, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Rob nailed it. Just just trying to kind of shine a light a bit more on these later life costs that are going to fall on the shoulders of individuals. And again, one thing that was super interesting when we did some other research on, home care, we found that 3 out of every 4 hours of care done in some people's home is actually done by their adult children. But unfortunately, baby boomers were really the first generation not to have any children. So literally and it's usually with adult daughters, and daughters, Canada, we have this amazing labor force participation rate of women, but that also means they're not at home helping to kind of do these free in-home care services. So yeah, the world is going to change a lot, and the more, the experts can be aware of this, that retirees today are facing a very different future than their parents, and just to be ready for it.
For sure. I mean, I have 2 teenage daughters, and I'm not expecting anything from them at my old age. They're going to be off doing their own thing. So maybe back to you, Bonnie-Jeanne. We're getting some questions here around research and development of the tool and the methodology. So you talked about how the cost of aging calculator is free and non-commercial, but obviously it took many years to research and develop this tool. So would you be able to share a little bit or more about the methodology and also how the tool was funded?
Yeah, so the funding is a really cool story. So we had made this decision not to take commercial funding at all, which is completely unheard of. But we knew that, again, if we put any logo on it, it would really have limited options, because, pension plans, firms, they don't want to hand their members or clients a tool that's branded by somebody else. So we knew that the minute you put a logo on it, it just limited. It had to be neutral. So we had a problem. How do you actually, fund something that's research intensive without commercial partners?
Mm-hmm.
The answer came from a really funny place. We decided just to forge ahead anyway with the work, and we hired someone named Catherine Peterson. And she was just a researcher at the NIA. She was helping to she wasn't a financial expert. She had more of a health background. She was making phone calls to get those costs. And she saw firsthand kind of what we were building and how valuable it was. And she also saw it was stalling progress, that we actually had no funding. We couldn't figure that piece out. She went to her family's foundation, the Peterson Foundation. She made the case. We had no idea this foundation existed. She came back and said, they're going to help fund you. So that really gave us a super vital seed funding that really did give us, across the finish line. And I think that was a need. And I mean, I've never had private philanthropy in the research I've done, but it really does, it's different than other funding sources. It can bridge gaps, can take risks, especially work like ours, because ours is in this weird no man's land between, academic primary research, but we also aren't a commercial product. We're really, we're not generating profits. We're really about social good. And then from there, CIRO, they actually stepped in, gave us some amazing support that really did allow us to actually launch publicly, translate the tool into French, and all this costs money. And then, even today's webinar was made possible, with some of that funding as well. So that was great. So, we've really been fortunate to have funders who have understood the vision. But the tool was definitely built on, passion and purpose. I would say not even a shoestring, like half a shoestring. And keeping it alive will require support. We need to update it. We really do want to expand it to more regions because we are kind of only hitting some of the major capitals. And also the other thing we'd love to do is really support, all those PC members. If we could do institutional adoption across the sector, that's just going to like springboard the whole thing forward. So, getting more partners, getting more, neutral funding sources that can really help us to get the solution into the hands of real people is great.
Excellent. So you mentioned some of these already. You talked about expanding the regions and getting it available to more institutional plans so that you can spread the word. What are some of the other next steps for the cost of aging calculator?
Yeah, so just to give a quick history, so we launched it just in February during the PC's National Pension Awareness Week. The response has been amazing. Rob wrote this amazing piece in the Globe and Mail, which everyone should read. And yesterday, Marie-Yves Fournier, she actually covered it in La Presse. So we've reached, both languages, which of course is really important for us to fulfill our national mandate. The uptake has been really remarkable. So again, we have like no advertising budget or anything like that. And when it was first launched, we looked and there was like 3,000 visitors. We're like, yay, 3,000, it's amazing. And then like 2 days ago, we checked again, it's 30,000. So there's been like a 10-fold growth just in a matter of weeks. And this morning I went online to just check what our disclaimer said. I couldn't get on it. And I just checked with our people and they said, oh, it's because there were like 5,000 people on it just this morning. And again, so this is all organic feedback. The other good news is that we do have a survey at the end just to see, how people receive it, if it's helping. And basically over 90% of people across the board, they say the tool's intuitive, it's helped their understanding of the cost of aging, and it also increased their confidence in making retirement financial decisions. So the overwhelming majority of all saying it's very effective. And of course, it's not just about, the stats, also knowing, hearing the stories behind closed doors about, from employers and government departments saying that it's really improving financial literacy from their perspective as well. Now, going forward, yeah, we really do need to start improving some of the coverage. So, some of the north of Canada, of course, Winnipeg, Edmonton, rural Canada. We want to update the data, of course, annually to keep the numbers current. And again, like I said, we want to help support institutional support. Now, what I want to do is to start doing kind of the research, which I think is be great. This is basically a whole new data set to start asking really neat questions about how well the retirement income system is serving Canada's. But again, we're in this weird no man's place between academic world and, a commercial world, social good research where you're trying to mobilize research. It's very difficult to fund. So if anyone's listening, who'd like to reach out, we're all ears. But I will say I am quite confident, just given the growth and the reception, that this will become an important staple of financial literacy within Canada's retirement income system.
Well, and the uptake so far has been amazing, like you said, so that's fantastic news. Maybe we can go to a couple of audience questions now. We have one here about the different home care options. So how do you best inform people of the length of the time a family may need for various forms of in-home care? Like how much of each magnitude, that since it's very expensive, people just want to have a better understanding of how you get those costs.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I come from the pensions world. We don't talk about long-term care. And I was very surprised to find out that, it's very complicated across the country. Back before the COVID, we did like a big projection of what the long-term care costs are going to be across Canada. And the numbers are really staggering. And when we try to collect the data, I learned firsthand that it's really difficult to even get data on this. Again, it really depends on jurisdiction. So the purpose of this was to actually just give some base estimate costs, like if you need 5 hours, like a light level of care, if you need 10 hours, if you need full-time care. Again, this is not about giving precise answers. It's supposed to be about illuminating this information gap. And that actually will motivate people to look a little bit more deeply and start asking, what is it my jurisdiction will cover? If I live in, again, this city, what kind of subsidies can I receive given my circumstances in my city or whatever it may be? Maybe there's community services you could receive. And I think most of all, to even start having those conversations with your family members, because again, up till now, it's really been adult children who have been doing this work invisibly in our system. There in Canada, there is no, it's not been government and it's not been pension plans who have been giving long-term care to older adults. It's been the family. It's like an invisible structure that we've been just relying on unknowingly. And again, going forward, it's going to not exist simply because people aren't there. So for people going into retirement, just starting to have these kind of real conversations with people and their families to understand expectations and coming up with, just some kind of plan, because nothing's worse. I mean, I tell my teenage kids all the time, you want to keep your options open, like don't close doors. So I think, having those conversations keeps options open. It just helps people make more informed decisions going forward. But yeah, so that there's no real answer. Like the answer is basically, it depends on yourself. What we're trying to give is good guidelines. It's based on the evidence and the research. However, care costs it's an individual item that you would have to kind of understand yourself. But this hopefully gives you a starting point. Rob, I know you have personal experience, and of course, experience extensively through financial planning. So I don't know if there's anything else you could add.
Well, I have heard in the past, and I can't cite an exact source, that the average tenure in a long-term care / nursing home is about 18 months. So maybe there's a guideline. But one thing I think we need to bear in mind is the gap between lifespans and health spans, and it's growing. And I think that speaks to the need to sort of think in terms of years of this type of care. And the fact that you're going to need more care, and that's going to be you're going to be traveling a journey from maybe a little bit of home care to more home care. I mean, I think the initial variable in the calculator is 5 hours a week of home care. That's not going to last anybody who needs home care very long. You're going to need to move up to 20. Then you might decide I need a retirement home, and then you might decide next step would be a long-term care home. There's a continuum there, and so I think it's a multi-year journey. That would be my recommendation in terms of thinking. There's no set average time period, and I think as lifespans continue to expand and health spans just don't follow along, you're going to need to open your mind to sort of moving from one step to another and modeling that out.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe a related question then. Given the current political climate, there's no guarantee of the future of many of the social programs that seniors depend on. So they're wondering, how does or will the tool adjust for those changes?
I'll take a first stab at this, because this is something I think it's it's a little bit under the radar, especially for the average person. So, we have the Canada Pension Plan, which is funded, it's dependable. We have actually 3 federal departments that project its cost going forward. So that's completely outside political tampering. Like, no government can come in and just change that. So that's something you can really hang your hat on. Now we have old age security, which is the guaranteed income supplement as well. That's funded out of general revenue. It's at a federal level though. So again, it's, a lot more visible. It's more difficult for any politician to come in and change, although they could technically. Then we have long-term care. So long-term care is not covered by the Canada Health Act. It's completely not part, doctors and hospitals, not covered by that. So this is why it's really difficult to nail down. And I think it's actually the most at risk, because as the older population builds, we already know, because we've done all the projections at a national level, Canada Pension Plan costs are going to go up, but it's already paid for, or it will be paid for. That part's done very well. Old age security, again, those numbers have been projected, and there's plans in place on how to cover them. But with even the Canada basic medical care, and especially long-term care, those costs have not been paid for. They're paid for out of general revenue. And what was really interesting to me, because again, right before COVID, I actually was the first, along with Michael Wolfson, who's a big researcher, and John Hurdy's, we were projecting out these costs into the future. And we were seeing these costs are going to go up enormously. And then during COVID, a lot of the things that we saw in the nursing homes was actually blamed on the aging population. And I thought, no, that doesn't make any sense. The oldest baby boomer is only 77. They are not even in the nursing homes yet. So we have not, like over the next 10 years, the pressures of the healthcare costs, both on the healthcare system, but also on the long-term care system, are really going to go up a lot. And I don't like to fearmonger, but I do like to kind of just let people know this is not covered. This is not a guaranteed service. Long-term care could very easily be even ratcheted down further. And already our systems has so many holes in it. Rob, it's funny, you said people don't spend that long time in nursing home, but that's often because there's like tens of thousands of people who are on nursing home waiting lists. They don't even get in until kind of, the end of their journey. So there's that. We also know from data that there's hundreds of thousands of older adults who say they're not getting the care that they need in their homes. So again, these are some of these problems people don't actually realize until they experience themselves, either personally or through a family member. But I just want to, in my role is trying to kind of help people be better prepared for retirement, understand the costs, understand that they're not guaranteed to be covered by government, understand what is currently guaranteed, promised by your government or your jurisdiction, but only knowing, again, as that person asks, those things all could change. And unfortunately, I feel like they will change given our demographics are going to put a lot of pressure on these programs. And they already had a lot of pressure, 5 years ago. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't know, Rob, if you had any thoughts from what you've seen from your readers.
I think we need to, one of the values of the calculator is along these lines. We need to make people more aware that the cost of care, even today, is considerable. It's a lot. Retirement homes tend to be privately run and they can charge market rates and they vary quite a lot, but I'm going to say 4,000 to 7,000 or 8,000 per month, including meals and shelter and rudimentary assistance. That's pretty normal, and you need to be able to afford that plus, your additional life costs. Long-term care is actually a comparative bargain in some provinces because there are caps on rates, and you can look up what the cap is. And in many cases, that would be less than a retirement home. But to me, the big surprise cost that I think people need to really engage with is home care. And you may get some assistance from the province for a rudimentary number of hours per month or per week, but that likely won't be enough. And in many cases, you're going to need to up that, especially if you think I want to remain in my home, but I can't really manage very much. And these are costs that you're going to have to bear. We could be talking $25, $30, $35 an hour. And that's all on you. You may get a little bit of assistance, a small number of free hours, but it's very much on you. So, we can talk about what's funded by government and what isn't, but already the system puts a lot of responsibility financially on the individual, but you're completely in the dark about how much it's going to be. And now at least there are some guidelines, some information on how you can start slotting that in and thinking, if I live to 95 and I want to stay at home and I need this much care, how much is it going to cost? And how can I make sure that I continue to have that kind of an income, even in that advanced stage of retirement? That's where planning is going to help people.
Nobody wants to think about being old and vulnerable, but it's better than the alternative, right? Now, this is kind of a related
I just wanted to
question.
interject here. I think the retirement industry has spent so much time talking about the great side of retirement. You're going to have time to travel, and you're going to be able to spend time with family, live your best life. But part of retirement is not doing that, and we have to face up to that. And I think the calculators pushes that process along a little bit.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And this is a related question for you, Rob. It's relevant based on what we're just talking about. Given most folks have fairly limited abilities to improve their financial circumstances, is knowledge of this kind just going to keep me awake all night?
Well, I think we need to be realists. You know what? We need to look after ourselves. We need to sort of look at, what do I want to do with my retirement? What can I do? Where am I going to be? You have to engage with it. It's not all a good news story, but there's a lot of discretion we build our own retirements. We have the income we have the wishes and dreams and plans that we have, and we have to compromise. And it'll just be the same going on for your later retirement years. It's not necessarily a bad news story. It's a story of what the needs could be and what the possible outcomes could be. And let's get the best match possible. Let's use hard information to get the best news possible.
Yeah.
And I
That's
would
fair.
say too, Alyssa, to that, like the good part of this is that a lot of those baby boomers still have health and wealth. So they still have ability to make options, but it's when you're, 85 or 90 and you've lost some cognitive ability, you may not have money anymore, you're maybe widowed. Suddenly your options are very limited. And wouldn't it be great to start making decisions now before that time comes and your options are limited? And I know even like, this is a bit outside my lane, but like I've seen Rob write articles even about people who, pay for their kids' down payment and they use it from their retirement fund. And again, not that people shouldn't do that, but just to know what you're doing and how you're doing it. What are the expectations? Is there a commitment from your kids to do something for you in return? Like, again, like just, having more clarity in the decisions we're making so that nobody's surprised later. Because I know like a lot of people have even seen the best intentions among families lead to a lot of disputes and tensions, even when the money's there, because it is very difficult to manage money for an older adult. And if their wishes were not made clear, suddenly, people don't really know what the right answer is, because there is no right answer oftentimes, because people don't know how long people will live and what their needs are going to be. So again, it's really to encourage people to look at the realistic side of retirement, like Rob said, and just start to making more informed decisions and bringing other people who are into the conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in the same sort of vein, I'm going to kind of condense a few different questions because that's all kind of the same theme. There's questions here about how the younger generation can use this tool and how it might engage them in retirement planning earlier, maybe getting them to save earlier, maybe getting them to have a better understanding of the value of their workplace retirement plans and some of these things. So I guess the question there is, how does the calculator engage that younger generation?
Yeah, so I can just answer quickly. So for example, in our Pension Center of Excellence, we have a lot of pension plans, and a lot of these pension plans are designed to pay a steady income for as long as you live, no matter what happens in the financial markets. And there's always this tension that it's called the defined benefit pension. People don't often understand the value of that until they're in retirement. And we have surveys at the end that says like people literally value their workplace DB plan more than anything else. Like they couldn't live without it. But people don't see that until they're in retirement. So again, how do you help people before their retirement when they just see this as something coming off their paycheck? It's almost like a tax, and they need the money. They need the money to pay for their kids' school or whatever it may be. So, helping people understand the value of something often is to help them understand what that future is going to look like, thinking about their future selves. The human brain's not very good at thinking of, the long-term future. So again, getting them to contemplate the future, the financial consequences of the future, and then also tinkering with the tools, saying, well, what if I do live a long time? What could those costs look like? Well, wait, I could have this extra dependable source of income that will give me steady income that I can budget for, that my family can help budget for me, even when I'm quite advanced in age. So these types of tools are so valuable to helping, pension plans and other employers and other stakeholders to show the value of the retirement plans that they're providing to their employees and members. Because it's basically, again, it's really difficult to value something that's happening so far in the future. But if you can help kind of frame the value of it by showing tools that show the costs, people will intuitively start to understand the value because they'll actually sympathize with their future self a little bit better than we normally do in a day-to-day way. But yeah, I don't know if, Rob, you had any other insights?
I have two thoughts. One, I think that for younger people, one of the main uses of this calculator is going to be for their parents. My parents are retired. What are the costs? They've talked about wanting to do this. I have a vague understanding of where their retirement savings are, what's feasible. And I think as the parents age, the kids are going to need this more and more. So it's almost like it's a planning tool on two levels. One for the children. Now, for the actual retirees themselves, my sense is that this is a tool that's really going to lock in with people at age 50 plus. You can map out how beneficial it would be to have good information on, the full needs of retirement when you're in your 20s and 30s, but people's minds aren't on retirement then, and it's very difficult to get their attention on that. And I don't think the way to do that is to say, when you're old and broken down, you're going to have a lot of costs, and here's a calculator to show you how it's going to be. But when you get into about 50, you start to look at your path to retirement, and your parents are aging at that same time. And I think you are very, very open to this kind of information. And I think, pension plans who are keeping track of the age of their workforce, when someone hits 50, bam, you send them an email saying, look at this calculator for helping you plan out, the last phase of your time in the workforce and beyond. Matt, you know what? Personal finance and financial literacy work best when someone is already engaged on the topic. And when you're 50 and you're looking ahead to retirement, that's when you're engaged.
Yeah, I'm feeling that myself right now, so I can completely relate. Bonnie-Jeanne, would you mind just doing a couple of real quick technical questions, just because there's so many people asking the same ones? They want to know about updates for inflation. Can you just go over the update process or the timeline a little bit more?
Yeah, so basically these numbers are in today's dollars. So we're going to be updating the numbers every year. Some sources of data we cannot do annually; they just don't get released annually. But we'll be updating them with inflation assumptions. There's lots of ways to figure this out. And what's really neat about this is that for a long time people have argued that the inflation that older adults face is different than the inflation that working people face. So the CPI we use is actually not the right inflation measure for older adults. So that's kind of a bit of an academic topic, but this will basically give us the first real data stream that we can actually show inflation for older adults. It's like a basket of goods, exactly the way CPI is done. So yeah, again, you're looking at the cost. These are the costs today. Obviously, if you're going to think about, well, I'm retiring in 10 years, you would have to then kind of say, well, that's going to go up by inflation in 10 years. So you can kind of do that math yourself, or just understand that, today's dollars, this is what it looks like in, 20 years times dollars, the value is the same, but yeah, of course, numbers go up with inflation. So, but yeah, that's kind of two ways to look at it from the individual's perspective. These are today's dollars, which will change with inflation by the time you get to retirement. The other is just, yes, we will be adjusting these each year with new data sources, which will naturally reflect inflation as well as other changes in the economy.
Great, thank you. Another question relating to methodology. There's some people wondering where they can find out more information about that, and if there's a paper that they can look at.
Yeah, so a lot of the methodology, you can see the Canada Elder Standard, which was the original measurement. Now, when we originally did this, we did it so effectively. People who are out there who understand the poverty lines in Canada, we based it on Canada's market basket measure, which is kind of like the poverty line for Canadian older adults. And for all Canadians. And then in 2010, I adapted it with my co-authors to older adults by adding in costs of care, things that really do distinguish older adults from working age people. And from there, we thought I thought, wouldn't it be great if we're looking at a basket of goods, not just for, lower income adults, but to also extend it to middle income adults and higher earners. And that's where this tool came in. So suddenly it's numbers and data that everyone across the income spectrum can use. And then also breaking down the data between different, cities and different ways of living. So the base methodology can be found in the 2010 paper, interestingly enough. But of course, we've enhanced it tremendously. And we're writing up those findings right now in a paper that we will publish, and we'll put it online. But again, the academic journal publication, it's a very long journey. It could take years. And we thought we're not going to wait till 2028 to put this out. So we put it out. But again, the methodology itself is fundamentally the same as 2010 with a lot of enhancements. And we will be putting our new journal paper on the website once it's ready.
Very good. Yeah, and a lot of that information is already available on the website, and then we're just going to get more data, like you said, as use of the tool increases.
Absolutely.
Again, just a technical question. Are the calculated amounts after tax or gross amounts?
So they are after, yeah. So the consumer tax part, this is not with consumer tax. So basically, this is no, okay. The problem is when you talk about retirement income tools, you're talking about income tax. So again, we're not talking about income sources. That's over there. However, there is a question of consumer taxes. So that's your GST and HST in whatever province you live in. Some of these items are not subject to tax, so it's not an issue. Some of them will be. And Chen would be the one to kind of dig into exactly. I don't think a lot of them really are, but the ones that do, are subject to tax, then, those would have the tax based on the region. But again, this is not, again, when you talk about income tools, financial planning tools, you're thinking about income tax, which is massive, like it's 40% difference. Here we're talking about, 10 to 15% on a fraction of the cost. So it's really not going to move the needle much. And some of those will have tax applied to them. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of a long way to answer that question.
No, that's helpful. And there are a few more technical questions like that, which we're going to try and answer. But I think that's a helpful guideline. So maybe just one more question before we close here. This person says, I've heard that fewer and fewer insurance companies are offering long-term care insurance. Will or is the research being used to develop the tool also be used to help guide government policy if the insurance industry is getting out of business?
Yeah, from what I understood, the insurance company has gotten out of business. So that was back in 2019. I haven't looked again. And I know also even in the US, the same thing happened. And that's because they underpriced it quite a bit and they lost a ton of money. So it really wasn't a very fruitful business. Again, it's a very changing time because again, in the past, we basically had this informal insurance system called the family, which was the backbone of long-term care in Canada and continues to be. So, there's been calls for a national long-term care insurance for sure to just help to cover this gap in our system. I don't know if that could happen because again, there is a lot of stress on the economy for a lot of different reasons, and it would need to be paid for by working Canadians. And I don't think people are prepared to do that right now. But other than that, of insurance companies, I do know that insurance companies will sometimes still offer it as part of kind of like a pension plan post-retirement benefit. So that's another way to cover this. I think it's tremendously valuable. I think long-term care is an insurance problem, and it should be solved with insurance, whether that should be done, through the government. Obviously, that's the ideal, and most countries actually do it this way. So when I remember talking about this at an international event, and my colleagues from Sweden just had no idea what I was talking about because they were like, what? The government doesn't pay for this? And we're like, no, we don't. So Canada stands alone. Unfortunately, though, we're a bit, if you want to set up one of these, you should have done it in the 90s. So it's never too late, but it's difficult because again, the people who should have paid into the system, if we were to create a national long-term care insurance, are now kind of at the point, are in retirement. So it's tricky. It's going to be tricky to fund something like that. But yeah, maybe Rob has insight on kind of the commercial side of this, but I don't see insurance company jumping too much into this business. Maybe they will. I don't know. Maybe they have, but yeah.
I would just quickly add that the insurance industry did try long-term care insurance several years ago, maybe 10, 15, and it was just a flat out failure. They may have mispriced it, but I don't think there was much demand to begin with. I think people are maxed out on insurance needs. They need life insurance, they need critical illness insurance and long-term disability insurance. And to tell them you also have to buy an additional kind of insurance for when you're 90, I just don't think there's a market for that. I don't know how you sell it, which brings us back to what Bonnie-Jeanne was just talking about, a public sector approach. I haven't heard anything, no trial balloons, nothing from government. But I will say our retirement system could really use a rationalization and an updating. We need to talk about registered retirement income fund rules. We need to talk about what OIS covers and how we could better deploy some of that money towards GIS and maybe addressing some of the government's funding needs. And this would be an obvious add-on here, the long-term care problem. Can we create a public program for that? I think it deserves a discussion.